Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse podcast here at ProMat 2023, and I'm joined by Joel Thomas of Siemens. He's the director of their Intralogistics side of things. So Joel, welcome to the booth. First off, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin, for having me.
Fantastic. I love it. Day one. Fantastic. He's good. All right. So tell us a little bit about, Siemens is here, and we've talked to Siemens on the podcast previously as well. But I'm curious from your perspective. I think I asked this question to Craig as well previously on the podcast, but I want to hear from your perspective. I mean, Siemens is all over the place in the world, right? So tell us a little bit about Siemens at ProMat. Like, why is Siemens at ProMat?
Okay, so a couple different things about that. Siemens is a very global company, right?
Right.
In the U.S., we're well known in the industry from our hardware and software standpoints.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we have the health and years business and a lot of other businesses. Mm-hmm. But what they decided to do this past year is they decided to have a focus on intralogistics. Okay. It's going to be one of the more focused verticals in the marketplace. And so they brought me on here recently and said, hey, can you help us identify what we need to do to understand this business and how do we grow this business? Because when you look at the trends that are happening, like the mega trends, right? Yeah. The digitalization, you see with the CHIPS Act, you see all the different things that is bringing manufacturing back into the U.S. What we want to do is we want to see that and see how we can support those customers and client base to get our technologies in front of them. Yeah,
absolutely, and I think that's a great thing too as well. And obviously bringing the all the power that Siemens has into this space, I think is a really great thing. So tell us intralogistics, right?
Yes.
So what is that? What is that?
So intralogistics by definition is the movement of material within the four walls, right? Okay. So not only do we do that, we have software that we do outside of the four walls, but my major focus is really how do we automate certain things within the four walls.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to that digitization that you're talking about, right? So I mean, when we look at digitization and obviously the movement within the four walls is critical, right? I mean, we look at the outside logistics, right, and all the movement in between facilities, stores, customers, wherever we need to go. But there's so much happening within the four walls to be able to get that box in the door and then get that box out the door, right?
Correct, yes.
So tell us a little bit about how when we look at the digitization side of things, I mean, how does that relate to our world?
So when you look at it, digitalization, all that means is, if you look at back 20 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. We used to do 2D CAD. Yeah. Then we went to 3D CAD.
Right.
Then we decided, okay, let's automate, certain aspects and see what we can prove out, right?
Right.
All we're doing now is with the cloud capabilities, right? Because now you're able to process so much data faster. Yeah. How do you actually simulate and emulate a factory before it's ever even built? What you have typically that happens right now is that you have a scope of material, right? You have this huge e-commerce boost. What happens is, okay, what you have sales today might not be your sales in 3 years, might not be your sales in 5 years, right? Yeah. And so how do you plan for that? So with digitalization, you're able to simulate a factory, take a look at what that factory is going to be able to do, and then once you actually, let's say that's one aspect of it. Yeah. Virtual commissioning. People are wanting to start a facility faster than ever before, right? Well, they can't wait the time to install the components, then start commissioning it, then testing it out. It's going to take a long process, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, what if you're all digitalization? Why couldn't you do that programming prior to the start of even putting hardware, hardware into that facility? You can prove out that theory of, my code is good, right? Yeah. And making sure that's all working properly so that you have a shortened lead time. So now you've taken that digitalization aspect, the 3D modeling, combine that with the virtual commissioning aspect, and then the key thing is, and what I haven't seen in the industry and what Siemens is bringing to the market is, how do we take that data that's actually happening in your real-world facility, bringing it back into our algorithms, right? Running simulations and saying, you know what, this is what you are going to have issues in the future. So now you have this closed-loop digital twin of understanding. Well, this is what I created at the factory now. Yeah. This is what I simulated and what's supposed to happen today. If you're going to do this 3 years and you're seeing your growth, well, these are going to be your bottlenecks. Let's figure out where to address those now, or sooner rather than later, so that you don't run into those roadblocks and have issues with expanding your business.
I think that's a great thing because you look at oftentimes like you put a project in place and then like you said, like 3 years from now, you're not necessarily sure what might happen, right? And then you run into that issue then, and now it's like, well, do you have to redo everything you did, or maybe you have to do a new setup? whatever the case is. So being able to see that beforehand, I think is really critical to getting the right solution in place in the beginning, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about kind of how like if a company is coming to ProMat like this year, right, and they're, and I'm sure there's tons of companies that are coming and they're looking to, get into automation or expand on their automation. I mean, why should they kind of consider working with Siemens and kind of utilizing, like you're saying, these simulations to be able to really understand, like, in what direction should they go?
So I think that's a very good question.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, what I have seen in the industry, and understand, we sell components and software solutions, right?
Yeah.
The OEMs are the ones that actually integrate the projects together. So when we start partnering with these guys, what I'm seeing is there's multitude of softwares that are out there right now.
Yeah.
But there's not one true ecosystem that actually goes from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
So that end-to-end, solution, and that is the difference that Siemens brings to the market, is because if you have all these stagnant, or let's call it individual programs,
right,
how do you combine all of them to create this ecosystem that gives you that closed-loop digital twin?
Yeah.
You can't. And that's where, with Siemens, with the different companies that we have purchased over the years, with all the things that we have done in this industry, we have an end-to-end solution that actually provides that and does that. I don't see anyone really providing a closed-loop digital twin or even talking about that at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and you threw in there the digital twin as well. So I want to touch on that a little bit. I mean, but I think what you're saying and being able to give you that end to end, I mean, I think is so important, because I think a lot of people, especially like, we look at smaller or medium-sized businesses that are, they're realizing, like, okay, like, we need to get some automation in order to keep up with everything going on with labor, and people not necessarily wanting to work in warehouses, right?
Yeah.
There's more attractive things to do, I guess. But I think warehouses are sexy, as my shirt says. But so
I love this business, so it's
yeah. I mean, you gotta but people wanting to do pick all day long and all these things, it's getting smaller, the pool of people that want to do that, right? So we obviously are at a point where businesses are realizing, like, okay, yes, we need to be automated. So it's great that you're able to give them that end to end. So talk to us a little bit about the digital twin side that you mentioned in there, and how that kind of works, and how that gets kind of looped into this simulation that you guys are doing.
So I want to kind of break down your question a couple different ways,
Sure.
Because one thing that you said is you factored in the smaller customers, right? That potential out there.
Right.
Because maybe they're challenged with, where do I start? What do I do?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then can I go to a bigger company and ask them to automate my facility, because, is it going to cost me too much, right?
Yeah.
But my question is, wouldn't you want to have a simulation of what you can actually do for your building? Make sure the throughput matches your reality of what it is going on with your business, instead of actually cutting a check for what could be maybe issues.
Yeah.
Maybe you have more bandwidth than you really need, and you only build to what you actually really signed up for.
Right.
And that is what the digital twin capability does. It's really a lookalike of your factory that you can put on virtual reality goggles and actually walk through the facility. You can actually simulate it. When you come to our booth, you'll see the simulation.
Yeah.
We have our own CAD software. We bring the electrical, the mechanical. We talk about sustainability. What is the energy consumption that you're going to need?
Right.
Is it a greenfield versus a brownfield site, right? If it's a greenfield site, well, what do you need to tell your power supply company how much actual power you need for your facility?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the hardest things to calculate. And because we have that end-to-end where we can combine the electrical, the mechanical, the PLC, the logic, and everything together, you're able to tell what actually your utilization is, what your throughput is going to be, everything from the get-go.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge thing, and you touched on some things there that I think that people probably, if we're talking about these small and medium-sized businesses that are just trying to get into automation, probably are not considering at all, right? So it's interesting you touched on the electrical consumption as well, and I'm curious, from what you've seen through your work with Siemens and in the warehousing industry. I mean, as we're adding more things that are connected and more moving things in our warehouses, I mean, how are companies kind of addressing some of those higher electrical consumptions now as they start to add more electrical components in?
So you probably heard of like higher efficiency motors,
Right.
drives, right? Part of Siemens' pledge is that we want to be net carbon zero by a certain date, right? And I believe it's 2030.
Yeah.
And there's other companies out there that are also trying to go based on that,
Right.
based on those conditions. And sustainability is very important, but it's also optimization. When you look at a system, I've seen systems where we've oversized components
Right.
so that it's just all of the safety factor is fudged on top of the other, and what you see is this overabundance of what you really need versus what we're actually doing right now.
Right.
And so an optimization of the system is also one of the things that you get with this digital twin, because if you only need, let's call it 10 newton meters of torque, why are you putting on a 50 newton meter gear motor, right? And so it's proper sizing, proper utilization, making sure you have the right components so you don't have to use a 5 horsepower drive, versus a 1 horsepower drive.
Okay.
And it's just these different types of aspects that you see from energy efficiency, what type of conveyor systems do you want to do? All these things interplay together. And that's the thing that we want to understand is, okay, can we do regen?
Yeah.
If we have high dynamic, instead of using a brake resistor that dissipates energy, can we use something that can actually transmit the power back into the mains so then it can be reused somewhere else? So these are all different things that we're actually doing to make sure that we can provide energy efficient solutions.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think the fact that you guys are able to encompass all that in what you're bringing to the market, and being able to allow people to see all of these different aspects of it, I think is a huge thing, and I think it's going to help a lot of companies understand where direction they really need to go into, and also understand like some of the things that they probably would miss originally, like we talked about earlier, right? So really interesting stuff with you, Joel, and I want to thank you for coming by the booth and talking to us about Siemens. If people want to learn more about the intralogistics side of Siemens, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can go to our website, and under industry you'll see material handling or intralogistics, or please stop by our booth. We're heavily involved in MHI, so we're always advertising, ready to talk. Please look at me on LinkedIn and ask me questions. I'm always willing to answer questions there as well.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Joel, thank you very much for stopping by here on day one.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you very much. Appreciate it.